Alright, hey everyone. This is part two, the second video for the week of March 23rd. This is being posted on Wednesday, March 25th. Um, again, another YouTube video. We're still doing it this way. We may switch to Zoom, which I assume some of you are using for other classes, but we may stick like this. So right now, this is the way we are going to do it. Um, Today we're going to talk about summary versus analysis. Analysis and summary and the distinction between the two are so important to understand for your papers. Um, One of the biggest shortcomings and faults with any sort of paper, uh, the personal narrative, the argumentative paper, the ethnography, a research paper, anything you write, is the severe lack of analysis I see all the time. So when I say analysis, think for a moment about what you think I mean by that, or what you generally interpret the meaning of analysis to be. It's kind of hard to do off the top of your head, or at least for me it is. This is something that's really important. So what you are going to need to do right now, before you watch the rest of this video, is to pause this video now, whatever, just stop this video, go to resources and various material on the front of our Canvas page, and watch the video at the bottom of that list called Summary versus Analysis Coin Toss. That's what it's called. The video is it's a excerpt, 5 minutes. It's only 5 minutes. A 5-minute excerpt from a movie called No Country for Old Men, which some of you may have seen. It's based on a novel by Cormac McCarthy. It's a fantastic movie, and it's fun. Anyways, watch that later on, once everything passes. Right now, watch this video. It's a 5-minute video. It's a famous scene from the movie called the coin toss scene. Go watch that now, and then what I want you to do is come back to this video and think about what literally happened in the scene. What literally happened, meaning this person did this, did this, did this. This is what I see happening, the objective material. So I want you to tell me objectively what you saw with your own eyes in this video. So again, stop now, go to readings and various materials, go to resources and various materials, go down to the bottom, you'll see a video called Summary versus Analysis Coin Toss. Watch that now, please. I'll put you on the clock. Okay, now you're back and you've watched the video. Please watch the video. So, what you may have seen, or what you did see, literally happening was a man walked into a gas station, he talked to the attendant, he put something on the counter, he spoke to him, he flipped a coin, and then he left. That objectively happened, right? You can't refute that. If I remember correctly, you can't refute that. That is what happened in that scene. Anyone who watches it or listens to you would have to agree that's what happened. So what you've just done is summarize that scene for me. And again, when we talk about scenes and data we might find in our research, we find something objective, but think about what I've always talked about. If we go to a movie and we just see a guy walks into here, he does this, and it's written on the screen, and then the credits roll, we'd be upset. We need further painting. And what we do when we watch a movie and we see something objective happen, or when we research and see data, we collect our data, we're seeing objective information. We are, in essence, seeing what is literally happening before us. That alone is not enough to put into a paper. You cannot just show the data. And this happens in argumentative papers all the time. It happens in any sort of paper. You just show me data. You say, well, here's a problem, here's my stance. Sometimes you don't even write the stance. And you just tell me 203,000 people want to go to the moon. Someone landed on the moon in 1968. We are no longer conducting moon missions. Okay, that's fine. That's important to put in your paper. I have objective information that you've told me. But you need to take it a step further. You need to give me analysis. So what I want you to do right now, again, it's just 5 minutes, go and rewatch the video and tell me your interpretation of the events that are happening. Meaning, don't just tell me objectively what has happened. Tell me what those objective moments mean. Why did he walk in? Why did he say the things he said? Why? Why did he flip a coin? What did that cause? What is going on? Your interpretation. We might all have different interpretations, but you still will have an interpretation based on the objective data you're seeing. So, again, one more time, this is what we do in class. We'd watch it twice. Go watch it for the second time. Again, I will be... Okay, now you've gone and watched the second time. There's many things you could say, right? And normally I would ask one of you or a few of you to tell me what you think happened. And you would say, well, a man walks into a gas station to threaten a guy. He asks threatening questions. He scares him. He makes fun of him. He flips a coin for suspense to freak the guy out. He humiliates the guy for his job and how he got the business and where he lives. There are many interpretations. None of what I just said, and you'll have a lot more. Think about that scene. Please watch it and think about that scene. You'll have a lot more of your own interpretation, but none of the things I just said are actually stated in that video. We assume it. We're interpreting what we're seeing, okay? If I ran into class today, or I'm not in class, if I ran into frame in this video today and I was bleeding and I was going, ow, ow, and then I went, hey, everybody, here's the class for today, you would think something happened, right? You'd have an interpretation. And if I didn't tell you and this is all you saw, you just saw this data, then you would say, you could say, he got in a fight, he lost, and still had to come to class for some reason. He decided to still come to class. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe he got beat up right outside the classroom. Maybe he's in a lot of pain. Maybe he likes to get whatever. Okay, you would have an interpretation. You would think these thoughts. That's your interpretation. Your interpretation is your analysis. This is what is lacking in most papers. If you just tell me stats and data and statistics to make your logos present, you're just telling me bland information that I can look up. I can go, okay, I believe you. That's fine. But why are you telling me this data? Well, why? What does it mean? What does it matter? Again, your reader will always ask, why? What does it matter? So you have to answer that. And you answer that with your analysis. Well, because we don't do moon landings anymore, we must not have the money to do it, or the impetus and reason to do so is no longer there. We no longer want to prove our stature to the Soviets in the Cold War. Your analysis, your reasoning, it's reasoning and interpretation, which is unique to you. That's why you are writing this paper. That's why you are making the argument. It's unique to you. and it goes beyond stats. So every single time you put the history of your problem, the context of your problem, your stance, your data to back it up, and your anecdotes to elicit pathos, those need to be elaborated on with your analysis. Again, your interpretation. Why are you telling me this, and what does it mean? Okay, I think you all can get that. If you have questions, of course you can't raise your hand, but you can email me your interpretation of what the data is you've put, your observations, your objective information that you've seen, added with your subjective analysis. Analysis is by nature subjective because it's your interpretation. Someone else might get a different interpretation during which they could argue your point. That's the whole reason argumentative papers exist. It is I'm subjectively trying to tell you something. I disagree with this, even if you might agree. We have two subjective points. I'm going to tell you why I am right and why my subjective point is the correct way to solve this problem. Let me take a moment here and say, to review things, because I can't emphasize enough the structure. And when people ask, how do I write this? How do I write this? What structure do I put this in? Problem. What is the problem and relevance? What is your stance? And what is your solution? That is your very loose outline and template for an argumentative paper. In between those, and to elaborate on those, you need to use the rhetorical triangle. Ethos, pathos, logos. Your credibility, your data, and your appeal to emotion using anecdotes, small stories, or characters. Part of your logos could also be the history, some backstory. I beg you, please do not give me 2 whole paragraphs or a whole page on the history of the problem. Just tell me something like this has been going on since 1962. Whatever the case is. Give me some history if you need to. But please don't take up your... It's not a history paper. It's also not a compare and contrast paper, and I've said that before in class. You're not comparing 2 arguments. You're stating your argument, and you might address the other argument's stance, which is the counterpoint to your paper. You are addressing the counterpoint in only certain moments of your paper. Please do not just compare the 2 arguments and think that that's an argumentative paper. You have to have an argument. Sorry for pointing. You need to have an argument. It's your argument, your stance, what you conceive as the problem, and your solution, your subjective answer. Please refer back to that video. I have also posted the John Oliver video. I suggest you look at that again too, the Confederacy one that we looked at, our last real class. And please try to dissect them and understand what summary and analysis is. Okay, so that's some further elaboration on the structure. Again, if you want to go back and review the logical fallacies from last time, from the last video we talked about, they're very important to kind of sniff out and see in your own arguments and in someone else's, so that you can say, hey, you screwed up here. I know how to, that's not okay. Or in your own draft, you can go, oh, I need to fix this up. And a lot of you have gone on the discussion boards and pointed this out, which is really cool. I think you can all see each other's discussions. I'll take another moment right now to say not nearly enough have gone on the discussions, which is kind of pushing me further to say we're about to switch to Zoom so that I can see everyone participate. And it would be at the same class hours that we normally do. But as for now, we're on YouTube, or I'm on YouTube, and we're doing recorded videos. For now. I need to see people on the discussion boards. I'm kind of scared to see what's going to happen when you turn in your final drafts on Monday, because I'm not seeing much participation on the discussion boards, so I hope I see papers turned in. The class is still going and you will be graded. That's the easiest way to get a 0, is not turn in a paper. So please do that. Again, if you're watching this video, you're getting this information. All of the terms we've gone through, I've said, They are transferable from every project we've gone over. It's important to try to find a hook, which is a reason for your something interesting, an interesting phrase, an interesting title, an interesting situation, an interesting tone, voice. These things that make your reader keep going. I want to know what you have to say. Tone and voice. Are you angry? Are you calm? Are you casual, academic? You have to choose that. You also have to identify your audience. Is your audience hostile? Is your audience someone that could affect something very serious? Are they an authority? Are they a member of Congress that you're arguing to? Please, this is why you need to pass this bill, for example. Is it younger people, older people, whoever? You have to try to understand who your general audience might be. It could be broad, it could be small. Reviewing again, causality is super important. And we're going to see some of that from some readings in the book, which I'm going to assign. Let's see if we want to go there yet. Audience, don't forget the rhetorical triangle. Watch video for your analysis. Summary versus analysis. Again, do not just summarize data. Analyze the data. Even after watching this and hearing it and getting a definition of what both of those mean, you will still screw it up. I do. Anybody would. That's why you need to look at your papers and say, have I added my interpretation, my reasoning? You have to. That's why you're arguing. Please don't leave that hollow. Okay? Okay. So causality, the way a paper flows. We talked about that in a personal narrative. You remember the triangle? If I can make a triangle shape, I can't make a triangle shape. Whatever. You remember the triangle. One thing causes the next thing, causes the next thing. That doesn't stop with other papers. Your paragraphs and your ideas have to move forward logically. One idea leads to the next idea, leads to the next idea. It can't just be random ideas. Oh, and this. Oh, and this. Because then it appears that you haven't really thought it through. The paper seems disorganized. It says, oh, and by the way, oh, and by the way, oh, and by the way. That's annoying. If someone were arguing with you that way when they were speaking, you'd go, overload of information. I don't know what you're trying to say. I'm going to walk away right now. And then they're really not going to listen. They're really not going to be convinced. And they're really not going to help you with a solution. So let's look at the book. And we're going to talk about some things. I want you to read this on your own as well. This is very, very important. Starts on page 268. If you've gone through some of the sections in the book about argumentative papers, you'll see that I'm leaving a lot out. Things that I might disagree with or place less emphasis on. And I don't want you to stress out and say, I need to read this book like a math book, like everything accumulates. No, I'm giving you select sections. So let's take a look at 268. And these are revision techniques. These are things you need to look at when you're revising your drafts or constructing your paper. So please look at these things. These are just very technical pieces of advice. Okay, I'm going to kind of elaborate on them. They do so as well in the book. So please look at page 268. Being well informed. I guess that's the key. That's your authority. That's why you institute the rhetorical triangle. If you're going to argue with someone, they're going to ask what gives you the right, and you say, well, I am very well informed. Not only am I close to the subject, I am informed on the subject, and I'm about to show you how. I've done my research. I've observed things. I've seen emotional impacts of this. That's how you show you're well informed. The book emphasizes this. It says, if you expect your readers to accept your ideas, you will need to establish yourself as someone they should believe and trust. Yes. So you might need to add a compassionate tone. You might need to reach out. I'll skip their examples. The next one that says being reasonable. It's a good point they make. It says, even if your evidence is strong, so you have strong logos, your argument will not be convincing if it does not seem reasonable. One way to present yourself as a reasonable person. So remember, everyone knows that you are present. Even if you're just an author, You're just the writer of this paper. You are still, they know that it's you, a person, a human being, not just a piece of text on paper. It says, you need to establish common ground. That's what being reasonable means. Stressing possible points of agreement instead of attacking those who might disagree with your position. Okay, a good example of this is in the John Oliver video we've watched, which again I hope you review. He even says it very emphatically to the camera like I'm about to do. He says, I get why you might think that. He says specifically, I get why you might think you want to erase your history. I get that you might want to erase or not think of those in your family who may have been complicit in this problem. I get that you think this. I understand. That's extending an olive branch. It's saying, here we have common ground. Another example of this is we both go to this school. So let's say your argument is there needs to be more soap in the bathrooms at Delgado. That would be my argument. And let's say I'm talking to another teacher, and I say, look, and he's disagreeing with me. He or she is disagreeing with me. And I'm saying, hey, we both work here. We both use the bathroom here. Why is there not more soap? You see how I've established right there? I've given us common ground. I've said, look where we both are. That is inherent in every argument because we have identified a problem that affects us all, and we're aiming for a solution that affects us all, hopefully for the better. Make sure you try to emphasize that you both are going through this, even if you have different opinions. Even if you have a strong opinion and you think you could never agree with the other side, you're still both going through it together. Okay. Being fair is the next thing they say. If you want readers to respect your point of view, you need to demonstrate respect for them by being fair. It is not enough to support your ideas convincingly and maintain a reasonable tone. You also need to avoid unfair tactics. In particular, you need to be careful not to distort evidence, quote out of context, slant evidence, make unfair appeals, or use logical fallacies. You have done some work now on logical fallacies. It's a big one because it feels deceptive and someone might catch on and go, hey, you're trying to trick me. We see that all the time right now in the news. Or accusations of it. People are very attuned to that right now. They're saying, hey, this is a biased source. Oh, hey, how can you trust anything you read in the news? And that's kind of an extreme example. But they're starting to suss out and be able to see these fallacies on their own. As you have, I'm sure, when you come across articles on Twitter or on TV or whatever it is you might use. So here are some bullet points they have, and I'll elaborate. Do not distort evidence, which means misrepresenting. It's unfair. It is not ethical or fair, for example, to present your opponent's views inaccurately or to exaggerate his or her position and then argue against it. Let me give you an example of distorting evidence, okay? The way I would put it is kind of hyperbolizing or exaggerating or making a kind of stretched out, blown up version of your audience's counterpoint. So, let's say we're using that example that we shouldn't be writing about gun control. And I say, hey, there should be, let's hypothetically say, there should be restrictions on certain guns, no bump stocks, no semi-automatic rifles. These should be eliminated from the free purchase of weapons. And then the counterpoint saying, he wants to destroy the entire Second Amendment. That's who my opponent is he wants to destroy the entire Second Amendment. That's not true. That's not what I said. And it's unfair to me, and it makes your argument then invalid, or at least less credible. There are some examples I probably shouldn't use to give stuff away, but essentially that's what it means. You're exaggerating, you're blowing up your opposition's point. No, I did not say I want to eradicate or get rid of the Second Amendment. You heard what I said, so address it specifically. That's what's fair to your counterpoint. Okay, do not quote out of context is their next point. Do not quote out of context. This is important when you're looking at data. This is what I usually would write on the board. I would say, you found a piece of data that says, Dan hates cats. Dan hates cats when they are in danger of being run over by a car. You can't just shorten that and take some out of the context and say, Dan hates cats. Well, that's not at all what I said. Just because those words came out, you left out the context. You left out what was going on around it, and you actually left out my words. There are much better examples. I'll try to think of one. Dan is a bad grader if the student doesn't do his work appropriately, his or her work appropriately. If you just take Dan is a bad grader, all the context is gone. We were talking about how the student does the work, not necessarily about Dan's grading. Okay, it means two very different things. So make sure you do not distort the words of your source. It's not fair, and it's easy to see when someone's looking because it usually comes out like hyperbolic or transparent, or it rings false. Okay, they say do not slant evidence. Slanting involves choosing only evidence that supports your position and ignoring evidence that challenges it. This is important, and this is what I talk about a lot, okay? When you're finding your data, when you're looking at your sources and resources, don't just find things that agree with you. That doesn't fill your argument. You need to find data that actually supports the other side of the argument. So you can, again, say something like, I get where you're coming from, and I see your statistics. But here's why my statistics matter more in this argument. Do not make unfair appeals. That's kind of making something melodramatic. Let's say you're using an anecdote and you're trying to elicit emotion, but you blow the story out of proportion. You let it take up most of the paper, and you're lying, and you add false details, which happens a lot in arguments. Or you propose a hypothetical that didn't really happen, and you're adding fiction to it that's melodramatic. That's faking emotion. It's causing fake emotion to your reader. Don't do that. And then it says don't use logical fallacies. Okay, we'll kind of skip ahead here because it's about drafting. So I was talking about causality. So that causality still exists in a formal paper like this. And a simple way